In the light of Nigel Farage's interview, which he's given on GB News, I mean, it's extraordinary. Given the fact that he works for GB News and then he's interviewed by GB News, it's a little bit nepotistic or onanistic or whatever word you want to use to describe that rather cozy relationship, and it smacks of a certain desperation to keep hogging the airwaves, and surely he has enough credibility to be interviewed by a separate organization than the one that he actually broadcasts on himself. But there we are. That's as it is. But I think he was right to identify a passage in David Cameron's statement, jointly released by Cameron and the German foreign minister, in which he says too many civilians have been killed, absolutely, and then the Israeli government should do more to discriminate sufficiently between terrorists and civilians, ensuring its campaign targets Hamas leaders and operatives. Now, Farage interprets that as suggesting, which he's horrified by, that the Israeli government is at the moment targeting civilians. And I think that's reading slightly more into a poorly worded statement than it actually supports. And I think Farage is fundamentally wrong in what he says. I also think that it's important to establish the fact that there's a very interesting video doing the rounds of Israeli Defense Forces giving water and medical care to Palestinians on the beach. And I also think that locked into a guerrilla fight with Hamas, and recognizing that Hamas is certainly not beyond using civilians as human shields, and recognizing some sort of collateral damage as the inevitable price to pay for victory, and that it's simply a matter of keeping this fight going until global opinion turns absolutely against Israel. I think the deaths of Talaka, Chaim, and Shambritz, mistakenly identified as terrorists, although they were approaching the Israeli soldiers shirtless and waving a white flag, they were fired upon against Israel's rules of engagement. I mean, this is just a trigger-happy nonsense, and there have been instances of Israeli soldiers going beyond their remit, singing in a mosque, shooting at people aimlessly. And this tells us something about the nature and the stress that they are facing in the Gaza campaign. It's an unfair campaign, it's a horrible campaign, and I think when history is written, Netanyahu will be seriously condemned for risking this campaign and standing alone. In doing so, he's alienated his allies. And it's not enough for Elon Levy to say that this is an unspeakable and unbearable tragedy. The whole of Israeli society is in a lot of shock and pain today. I can say last night at Shabbos dinner, when the news came through, no one could speak for 5 minutes because everyone was stunned into silence. Of course everyone was, but this is, I'm afraid, the result of pursuing this sort of campaign. You can't tell who is an enemy and who is an ally in this sort of guerrilla conflict, because everybody looks like a potential adversary, and it's impossible to tell one from another because they're not wearing uniforms, and because this is not conventional warfare. And this needs a much bigger force, a much more concerted and global investment of energy, and I think that's there. I think the determination to take down terrorism is there, and I think there's also a determination to see Hamas, if not entirely eradicated, certainly converted to a peaceful administration. But Israel does not make it easy. And I can only repeat what I said the other day, that I was appalled by the Israeli ambassador's words, saying that Israel no longer has any faith in the two-state solution and doesn't want the two-state solution. I hope it will. I hope this was just testing the ground, and I hope this testing public opinion, and I hope that Israel will revise its opinion on this, because it is the most the clearest way forward, and community is the only direction. That's community of Israel and Palestine, unless the Israeli government at the moment just wants a permanent war, and that doesn't do anybody any good. And it is a shame that Israel and Palestine were not able to embrace the intervention and negotiations, at least proffered earlier. In the same way as it's a shame that negotiations couldn't advance between Russia and Ukraine. But again, it's about right, and it cannot be right to give an invading country like Russia any satisfaction. It cannot be right to give a terrorist organization like Hamas any satisfaction. The water is highly muddied by Netanyahu's ground operation, but I think one has to look at things separately and recognize that there are ethical certainties here, even if these are highly confused at the moment, or even if the reality of the ground offensive has highly confused or highly obscured the ethical reality. The ethical reality is still that a terrorist organization should not be rewarded. Now, against that, of course, you could say, well, Israel was very much founded on the back of the terrorist activities of organizations like the Irgun. And yes, even then, we're muddying the waters heavily. But the fact that the waters are not entirely clean shouldn't stop us making very clear ethical statements.